The sound of tearing paper echoed louder than thunder inside the quiet bank, sharp and final, as three small pairs of eyes widened in disbelief, and a single father felt his chest collapse. In that moment, dignity shredded as easily as the check in the bank manager's hands, hope scattered across the tiled floor like confetti no one wanted to celebrate. He had walked in believing this would be the day things finally stopped falling apart. Instead, it became the day everything was tested. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one expects it, please take a moment to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Ethan Miller had learned to live with exhaustion as a permanent companion. It sat behind his eyes, pressed into his shoulders, and followed him everywhere like a shadow that never left. At 34, he looked older, not because of time, but because life had asked too much of him too fast. 3 years earlier, he had been an ordinary man with ordinary dreams, a construction supervisor with a steady paycheck, a wife who laughed easily, and a small house that felt just big enough. Then illness came like an uninvited guest and refused to leave. Within 8 months, his wife was gone, and Ethan was left standing in a hospital hallway holding 3 newborn babies, triplets who arrived early and fragile, carrying his wife's eyes and none of her protection. Raising 1 baby is a full-time job. Raising 3 alone is survival. Ethan learned to measure his life in feedings, diapers, and sleepless nights. He learned how to warm bottles with one hand while rocking a crib with the other. He learned which cries meant hunger and which meant fear. What he did not learn was how to replace 2 incomes with one, especially when his construction job disappeared after an accident left him with a damaged knee and mounting medical bills. Savings vanished. Credit cards maxed out. Pride became a luxury he could no longer afford. The check he carried into the bank that morning represented more than money. It was a final lifeline, a disaster relief grant approved after months of paperwork, interviews, and waiting. A local foundation had stepped in to help families facing sudden hardship, and somehow, despite the odds, Ethan qualified. The amount was enough to cover rent for 3 months, utilities, and childcare so he could start physical therapy and look for lighter work. It was hope printed on paper, thin but real. He brought the triplets with him because he had no one else. 3 small children sat in a worn double stroller, one balanced carefully on his hip, their jackets mismatched but clean, their hair brushed with careful attention. They did not understand the weight of the moment. They only knew they were tired and hungry, and that their father's hand trembled slightly as he approached the counter. The bank was bright and cold, designed to feel efficient rather than welcoming. The manager, a woman with perfectly pressed clothes and a tight smile, glanced at the check and then at Ethan, her eyes lingering too long on his worn shoes and frayed jacket. Her expression hardened as she examined the document, tapping it against the counter like it was already a problem. She explained, without warmth, that the check could not be verified quickly enough, that there were policies, that fraud was common, that people tried things every day. Ethan tried to explain the foundation, the paperwork, the approval letter he had at home. He tried to keep his voice steady while bouncing the baby on his arm as the other 2 grew restless. He could feel eyes on him, other customers watching the quiet unraveling of a man who had already unraveled too much. Then, without warning, she tore the check in half. It was not dramatic in the way movies make things. Dramatic. There was no shouting, no gasps from the crowd, just the soft rip of paper and the heavy silence that followed. Ethan froze. His mind refused to catch up to what his eyes had just seen. One of the triplets began to cry, startled by the sudden movement. Another reached out toward the counter as if to grab what had been taken away. The manager placed the torn pieces aside as if disposing of trash and moved on to the next task, already done with him. In her world, it was a small act, a procedural decision. In Ethan's world, it was everything. He stood there longer than necessary, unsure what to do with the humiliation settling into his bones. He felt small, exposed, and deeply tired. He gathered the stroller, adjusted the baby on his hip, and turned to leave, his face burning. He did not notice the man who had been watching from the glass-walled office at the back of the bank, a man whose suit was expensive, but whose eyes were sharp with attention rather than judgment. That man was Robert Hayes, the regional director visiting branches unannounced to understand how policies played out in real life. He had seen the entire interaction. He had seen the way the manager's posture changed when she saw the children. He had seen the check torn without a second thought. And he had seen something else too, something many people missed, the quiet dignity of a man who refused to beg even when everything depended on it. Robert stepped out as Ethan reached the door. The bank felt different suddenly, as if the air itself had shifted. Employees straightened. The manager's confidence flickered. Robert addressed Ethan with a level of respect that stopped him in his tracks, calling him forward not as a problem, but as a person. He asked to see identification, to hear the story, to understand the context. Ethan spoke slowly, carefully, as if afraid any wrong word would make things worse. Within minutes, verification calls were made. The foundation confirmed the grant. Records were pulled. Policies were reviewed. The torn check was replaced with a certified one, printed and approved on the spot. But the moment that mattered most had nothing to do with money. Robert turned his attention to the manager, not with anger, but with disappointment. He reminded her that policies existed to protect people, not strip them of humanity. That dignity was not a privilege reserved for those who looked successful, that every person standing at that counter carried a story she could not see. The word he used when addressing Ethan lingered in the room, a simple term of respect that cut through everything else, reminding everyone present who they were dealing with. Ethan left the bank that day with the check secured safely in his pocket and something far more valuable restored inside him. He walked out into the sunlight feeling lighter, not because his problems were solved, but because he had been seen. Because someone in a position of power had chosen compassion over convenience. The months that followed were not easy, but they were different. The grant kept a roof over their heads while Ethan completed physical therapy. A job training program helped him transition into a project planning role that accommodated his injury. The triplets grew stronger, louder, more curious about the world. Laughter returned to their home in small, unexpected moments, during messy breakfasts and bedtime stories read with exaggerated voices. Ethan never forgot that day in the bank. He never forgot how close he had come to losing everything, or how one decision could have changed the course of his children's lives. He began volunteering with the same foundation that helped him, speaking to other parents drowning in quiet desperation, reminding them that asking for help was not failure, it was survival. Years later, when the triplets were old enough to understand, Ethan told them the story. Not to make them angry, but to teach them empathy. He told them how easy it was to judge someone by appearances, and how powerful it was to choose kindness instead. He taught them that respect could be an act of courage, especially when it went against the grain. If this story has been touching your heart so far, if you feel that tightness in your chest that comes from recognizing something deeply human, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and stay connected to this channel. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and reaching those who need them. Just before we end, we have a special request. Please comment the word kindness below if you believe one compassionate moment can change a life. Let it be a reminder that empathy still exists, and that we all have the power to offer it. Because somewhere right now, a tired parent is holding on to hope printed on paper, praying the world will be gentle enough not to tear it apart.